The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
You've always got time for Short Time.
Hey, it's Mario Lopez.
David Taylor.
Brent Metcalf. Johnny Hendricks. Tony Ramos. Bubba J.
Mike Golick.
Matthew Modine.
The one and only Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to the one and only Short Time Wrestling Podcast by the often imitated and never duplicated Jason Bryant.
Now up on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, we're going to try to get fit. And this is easier said than done as I sit here in a chair churning out podcasts about wrestling. But Rob Dionne is our guest today, former wrestler out of Long Island. He is the guy behind OpenSkyFitness, and you can find more about what he's doing at OpenSkyFitness.com and at OpenSkyFitness on Twitter. Rob's a former wrestler, multi-sport athlete out of Long Island. We're going to talk a little bit about wrestling, but we're going to talk about fitness as a sport in general, and as I guess wellness is the term we're going to use. First of all, Rob, welcome to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast.
Jason, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So just to give you guys some backstory, how the heck I found this guy. So I listen to podcasts about podcasting. You're listening to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. You know how much I nerd out about podcasting. Well, I was listening to a show called Podcast Junkies, which I've been a guest on, and I'm on my way to the Midlands. I'm landing, and I hear Rob on the show. And if you want to hear it, it's podcastjunkies.com/114. And he goes into a real deep dive of what he's done with the podcasting space and OpenSkyFitness. But I was sitting there and he mentioned wrestling, and then my ears perked up. I was like, okay, here's a wrestling guy moving and shaking, creating some fitness things for people around the country. I need to have this guy on my show. So, Rob, that is the short version of how you ended up on this program.
Yeah, I it's interesting because you're like, when you pitched it to me or you hit me up on Twitter, I was like, this guy's, you came at me just from wrestling. And I was just like, what is this guy talking about? Like, I wrestled in high school. I haven't wrestled in 20 years. But, then we had the discussion about like what the realm of this is. But there's so much in wrestling that someone, especially if you stick with it for a long time, that you take with you for the rest of your life. I'm really excited about having this conversation with you.
Yeah, and you're a guy from my era. You graduated high school 2 years before I did. You're from Long Island. Let's talk a little bit about getting involved in wrestling. You said you wrestled from the time you were 11 years old to the time you graduated. And what was it about wrestling that kind of drew you to the sport?
When I was a kid growing up, my mom always wanted me to play soccer and baseball. And I did. I was on Little League. I was, on the soccer team. And I hated it. I hated it because I wasn't a team guy. I didn't like being on teams. I didn't like relying on anybody else. So the two sports that I wanted to play was wrestling, and I wanted to swim. And my mother thought, one, I was going to get killed if I wrestled, and the other, I was going to drown if I swam. And so I eventually, when I turned 11 years old, I was like, I was going into my seventh grade. I was going into junior high, and I was like, you can't stop me now from joining the teams. And I started. That's exactly when I started wrestling. And I ended up. I'm 5'10". At the time I was small, but I'm not necessarily a tall guy. So I just had a really good sense of body awareness. And so I was a good grappler. And it was very quickly that I realized that it was something that I was good at and something that I really enjoyed doing. So that's kind of how I got into it. And it turned out that my sister was dating a guy who was a state champion, county champion, state champion, and eventually, a couple of years later, he became my coach. So I really got wrapped up in it for a while and loved it. So that's how it started.
And of course, this is Long Island. So back in the day, the qualifications, you win the counties, whether it be Suffolk County, Nassau County, for those familiar with the island. Being a county champion was a huge deal. I mean, people will still walk around 15, 20 years later and go, I was Suffolk County champ. Yeah, 1984. What were you? Yeah, you ever win counties? No.
Yeah, exactly. It was very Al Bundy. Everybody kind of talks about that. Now, I didn't win counties. I didn't end up going to states, but I was in that circle of guys. I mean, if you really did love wrestling, it is a community. Like, you guys are kicking each other's ass literally every single day in that room. And if you've been in a wrestling room with just the mats and how hot it gets in there, it's like a whole nother experience that I don't think most people quite understand. So the group around it is it's a phenomenal community of people that you just kind of get wrapped up in.
You also had to make a unique choice as the way the school systems were set up going into 10th grade. You know, some places have middle school 6 to 8. You were in a system that had a 7, 8, 9 junior high. You had to make a choice between two of your favorite individual sports at one point.
That's right. Yeah. So I swam and I wrestled for 3 years straight, and I was MVP on the swim team. And the coach at the time talked me into swimming my 10th grade. So when I first got to high school, instead of going into varsity wrestling, I went to varsity swimming, and I swam that year, and I did really well. But at the end of it, I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was really getting what I wanted out of it, like I was getting from the wrestling. And my coach, Coach Santoro, who was actually a really great mentor to me as a kid growing up, because he would, you know, I mean, I know that every wrestler that's listening to this right now has had conversations with their coach ringside, you know, at the side, on the edge of the mat at some break. And it's just like, you got this guy. Like, you have this guy. At least you won this. This is yours. Just take it. And it's just like, you have this conversation, and those conversations sink down deep in your bones, and it really makes you feel like you can accomplish anything in your life. And that coach was able to get that from me and give that to me. And I knew I needed to go back to that. I just gravitated back. So I stopped swimming, and I went in 11th grade, went right back to the wrestling team, and ended up, you know, wrestling as a starter for varsity. And my coach was happy to have me back. And my swim coach was, I mean, he was as pissed can be. Guy grabbed me in a headlock and slammed me up against the lockers when he found out that I actually signed up for wrestling instead of swimming. So that was the decision I had to make.
Yeah, that's not I think once in my high school career, we actually did steal a guy from the swim team. He ended up being our 215-pounder, a guy named Philip Pauls, but it was the first year we had 215 in Virginia. So he's the biggest guy in the swim team. Like, hey, Phil, and he wrestled as a youth, so it was a natural thing. And he wasn't like a stud swimmer like you were. So, we did steal a swimmer or two, mainly because the guys were so full of muscle, they would sink to the bottom anyway. But as we get to the finale of your high school time, your time in high school, and was wrestling ever something you thought about pursuing at the college level, or were you just done with it in high school?
Well, I didn't think about it because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was graduating high school. I was kind of one of those kids who academically I did fine, but I didn't. My family didn't have a lot of money. I wasn't at the level that I was going to be getting a scholarship for wrestling. I obviously had given up on swimming. So I had to make a decision, and I ended up going to a community college, Suffolk Community College, local, and I was 2 years there. They didn't have a wrestling team. And while I was there, that was when I actually ended up becoming an actor. I started studying acting, and then I went to a conservatory after that for 4 years. So you bet your ass there's no wrestling team at a conservatory. You're lucky. We had a basketball team at our school that nobody went to, and the only reason people went to the gym is because the Knicks practiced there. So they had a phenomenal gym and a beautiful basketball court. And that was the only reason people went to the gym at my school. Literally, I'm not even exaggerating in that sense. So yeah, after high school, there wasn't much of an opportunity. But one of the things I did do when I was 18 years old, because my best friend and I, who both wrestled high school, we loved grappling. We also we figured out that the best way we can excel at it or continue to move forward with it was to start doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And in '96. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu just hit the mark because of UFC and Helio Gracie, and it was just, I mean, it started, Royce Gracie, I should say, from UFC. It blew up. I mean, it just blew up. There were Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu places popping up all over Long Island, and we happened to get into like one of the first ones. And I did that for the 2 years that I was, or the year and a half that I was still a community college before I went off to conservatory.
Yeah, and this actually will lead to a question later. You say you get into BJJ, and I think that's kind of supplanted people's belief. We talk about lifestyle sports, things you're playing golf, you're playing softball, you're cycling. Wrestling doesn't really have that ability, or it maybe it does, but it's not really pursued as a lifestyle sport. Whereas
that's right,
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really moving into that realm. People may not want to fight, but it's like, well, it's Jiu-Jitsu. It sounds sexier than wrestling in terms of a lifestyle sport.
Yeah, and exactly. People look at it as a good way to stay fit. They go and they sweat, and they have these, the classes throughout the they've done a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The Gracies have done a really good job at turning it into turning it into like a martial art that most people can grasp. But I think as a sport, people don't look at wrestling that way. But however, if you go to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class and it's a good teacher, it's almost run the exact same way that a wrestling practice would be run. You start out with technique. You start out with specific moves, and then you practice it for the next couple of maybe half an hour or whatever, and then you spa, or you wrestle, and you break up into groups, and that's basically the same way a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class would be run. So it's not really that much different, but I agree. I think that they've done some really great marketing and making it sound like something people can do as an exercise or as a lifestyle.
Yeah, and there's also, it doesn't hurt that there's like 900 Gracies floating around that know Brazilian
Exactly.
Jiu-Jitsu.
Who the had the sperm to spread that many of them? Jesus Christ, this guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, this guy must have been fucking everybody. I'm sorry. Can I curse on your show?
Well, yeah, you can now. I'll take care of that in post. Don't worry about it.
Or we just bleeped that. But he was having sex with a lot of people. Helio Gracie, that guy, Jesus. But they're a funny group. I'll tell you a story that I heard about the Gracies and the way that they got into fighting. Because my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master Mansour, he is in the United States, or at the time was the only red belt in the United States. I think he was 3rd degree or 5th degree red belt. I can't remember, but he used to be the police chief in Brazil. And when he was a kid growing up, he was fighting with Helio Gracie, or he was training with Helio Gracie, and the only way to practice, there wasn't enough guys to fight. Think about it. Like, this is a specific martial arts that's just starting, but nobody's good at it because there's not enough people doing it to actually get better. So what these guys would do is they would walk around Brazil in flip-flops, and supposedly when you were walking around in flip-flops in Brazil in probably the 1950s or 60s when this was happening, you were considered to be like a girly man, right? They would make fun of you. And what they would do, all of these Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys would walk around in flip-flops hoping guys would start fights with them in order to practice. That's how they practiced on the street. Isn't that crazy?
I should have kept that in mind when I came back from Rio and brought a bunch of their national flip-flops, the Havaianas. That's the thing down there, man. Flip-flops is their thing. And
I think that Royce Gracie changed that around. It's like, if you're wearing a flip-flop, don't with that guy. Sorry, I did it again.
Yeah, I mean, I brought a ton of them back. I was in Brazil twice last year. And that's, okay, good to know. Okay, so I'm wearing Brazilian flip-flops. Usually cauliflower ear would usually be the indicator. Don't mess with that guy. But hey, who knew? It's flip flops. But
that's right.
Moving towards your career in fitness, and a lot of this is broken down on your website with your about. And I'm not going to belabor the point about how you got into creating OpenSkyFitness, but basically what you have discovered about yourself and some things that you draw from your experiences as wrestling as a wrestler. And one thing that we talked about in the open was how wrestlers, and you even said to a point, swimmers and people, that they aren't team players. They're in it for the one-on-one attitude. And this has drawn wrestlers to things like Spartan races and yourself doing the triathlons and the ultra marathons, things like that. What is it about the one-on-one thing that really drives you and that has driven you to create OpenSkyFitness?
Well, it's like a personal test. When you compete one-on-one, it's like every single time you compete, you're testing yourself to see if what you're doing actually works. And the only way to know that is if you either go head-to-head or if you jump into a race or whatever it is. Now, you can be competing against other people, or you can literally just be competing against yourself. And I think that later on in life, as we get older, I think we're separated by 2 years. So I'm pushing 40. I'll be coming up on 40 next in 2 months. What happens is that, let's be honest, 40 years old, I'm not going to be breaking any world records. But the one thing that I can do is I can be competing against myself consistently. And I can't do that on a team. I can't join an intramural basketball team or some kind of, dodgeball team and feel like I'm making any kind of progress personally. So what I do is I sign up for races, I do men's physique competitions, and I want to know that I'm beating not just like people around me, but I'm beating myself. So like I did a men's physique competition a few years ago and I took 5th place. And I was like, and that wasn't about the guys that I lost to. It was about, I think I could do better for myself. So I wanted to edge up my placement. So, and then I did another one 4 or 5 months later, and I ended up taking first. And I'm like, done. I did it. Like, it's just this internal motivation to have to be better than you were, but only against yourself. And I think it starts out with a competition like wrestling or swimming, where I know there's only one guy in one of the other lanes that I really have to fight against. Otherwise, after that, it's I'm going for a better time, or I'm going for I'm going for the next level up. And I don't think you get that from team sports. I know that there's a lot of competitiveness in team sports. I shouldn't say that. Like, I'm not taking away from it. But I think there's a different mindset when you're talking about guys that will go out there and compete against just one other person or just for themselves. It's a different mindset.
Yeah. So how does that shape what you do with your company? And if you want to give us a once over on what OpenSkyFitness is all about, here's your opportunity, sir.
Thank you. Well, it does two things. One is it shoots me in the foot because I feel like I have to do everything by myself. So that's one negative aspect of it. But at the same time, what it does is it's given me an unbelievable drive to be better every single day. And in my business, like, you look at my website, OpenSkyFitness.com. If you look at that website, you don't just see now one person. Something that I've learned is over time is that there are teams. You have to build teams, right? It doesn't mean that you're not the leader, but it just means that that you are being led by someone. You can still lead it, but you need a team to succeed. You have your website, you have your podcast. It's not just you, right? You've even said, like, you had people contributing to your website. I read that, I think, in your bio, but like it takes kind of a village to kind of create something great. So over the last year, my wife has kind of stepped in, because if you're going to create a healthy lifestyle, you can't just do it on your own. You have to build a support system around that. So my wife and I have created this lifestyle that attracts other people, other like-minded people. And what I mean by that is we generally attract men and women over 35 who used to be athletes, right? And I'm speaking specifically to guys like me who used to be wrestlers, competitive swimmers, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like things like when we were young, we knew how powerful we were. And then as life went by, as we, had to start a career, we got engaged, we got married, we started having kids. All of a sudden, the power that we had from feeling really physically strong, it disappeared. And we feel like this lump of junk just sitting on the couch watching TV, and that's our way of kind of like tuning out. So now what we've done is we help those people who feel like they've kind of lost their way over the last 10, 15, 20 years, and we help them realize that they don't have to have that 20-year-old body, right? That's not reality. They're not 20 years old anymore. They can't have that body anymore, but they're used to working out the same way that they used to when they were 20 years old, because their brain tells them, I could still do that stuff. So what happens is most athletes will go back into the gym, they'll hurt themselves, and then there'll be like this cycle of getting hurt and coming back and getting hurt and coming back. And it's just this yo-yo up and down. And the same thing with nutrition. Now, wrestlers, which I know we're going to have that conversation about wrestlers, about the nutrition. I mean, they're one of the worst, because they've only learned to starve themselves and then just stuff themselves, starve and stuff. And it's like back and forth. And that's not really the healthiest way to go about it, as I'm sure you know. So as we've figured out that our demographic are the people that we really can hit out of the park every time is those men and women who have been away from it for a certain amount of time, and now they want to get back into it and they just don't know how. And if you come to OpenSkyFitness or if you listen to our podcast, this is the conversation. It's how do you build these healthy habits one step at a time in order to get back to where you want to be, or get to the place that you want to be, I should say, because we're not trying to get back to 20. We're just trying to get to the healthiest place that you can be at this moment in your life. And it changes. I mean, this has been a 10, 15-year process of me figuring out what works for me in order to make me feel good, have the energy that I want, make me, have a relationship with my wife that is healthy. And right now in, 2017, well, it's where it is. But 10 years from now, it's going to be something different. And 10 years from there, it's going to be something different as well. So it's this constant journey that we're all on. So that's kind of the way that I approach health and fitness. It's different than P90X, 12-week program, get six-pack abs in 5 weeks, go on this cleanse, go drop this amount of weight. None of that stuff works because it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the long haul. So that's kind of where I get to come at my clients, where I get to come at my listeners on the podcast and the people who check out my website. That's where I come from.
Yeah, this is something, I have this conversation with my wife all the time. We just took our 4.5-year-old to a trampoline park, or, it was the neighbor's kid had a birthday party and there's trampolines everywhere. And I'm out there and I'm jumping around. I'm like, I have this idea in my head that I can do these things that I used to do when I was 15 years old on a trampoline. And I've always been kind of a bigger guy anyway. I mean, I'm sitting probably around 255 right now. My wrestling, I wrestled 189, 215 in high school 20 years ago at this point. So I'm sitting there, I'm bouncing around and I'm doing some things and my wife's looking at me going, how do you do that? And it was something simple, like dropping on my back and going straight to my stomach, then popping straight up on a trampoline. Okay. Mm-hmm. I was like, great. I'm going out there. I'm sweating. And then the next day I wake up.
Uh-oh.
And I can't walk because I don't know, I did something with a ligament, I think, on my left foot. My legs are, I call it the used to could. I get so frustrated myself working out because these are things I used to could do. I tried to run a marathon a couple years ago. I was never a runner, so I never had an idea of really how to run. So that was probably not a good idea. I made it about halfway through before they kicked me off the course. But it's that mindset that we have this idea, and wrestling people, as bullheaded as we are, well, I know how to lose 20 pounds in a month. I know how to do all this. And we can't do it the way we used to because 90% of the time there's not a wrestling room. We're not going to go put our shoes back on because we're going to wake up the same way we did after jumping on a trampoline, only a lot worse if we're actually wrestling. But how do you try to break through the bullheaded nature of that some of these athletes have? If you've worked with wrestlers specifically, be like, look, you cannot do what you used to do. You got to start out slow. I mean, it's kind of humbling to know that, you used to be able to run several miles at a time to just get on the treadmill and walk as a start.
Well, I personally love training athletes. I personally think that training athletes is one of my, I think it's one of they're one of the easiest, and only probably from maybe because that was my history, but they're one of the easiest people to train. Now, for some, they might be, for some personal trainers or for some, health gurus out there, they might jump on that enthusiasm, right? So you're enthusiastic, you want to jump in full on, both feet. Let's do this. Let's get the diet plan locked in. Let's get the workouts locked in. Let's start running every other day. Let's do all this. And I've seen, I've done that. I've prescribed that to people, but years ago, because I didn't realize how much more traction, how much more, just power there is in one thing at a time. For a lot of these guys, it seems like because we knew what it was like to be wrestling 5 nights a week, and we knew what it meant to, watch our diets every single day. The practice, the weekend runs, the meets that happen on Saturdays and Sundays, like all of this stuff is like, it's set in our schedule. And we think that having a schedule like that is the means to the end. And that's just not reality. What you need to do is, now I don't know what your regimen is, but let's just say the average Joe who used to be an athlete and he wants to kind of get back into it, but he hasn't worked out in 3, 4, 5 years. He hasn't done anything besides maybe have a kid and run around and chase that kid around, or maybe he plays basketball with his buddies once in a while, that kind of thing. Well, it might just be as simple as how much time, and this is how I kind of work with my clients. I don't say, I want you to do this. I start out with, how much time can you give me every day to doing something physical? And then they give me that number, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is. I say, okay, now what is one thing, one winnable, very accomplishable thing that you can get done in that 20 or 30 minutes, right? I'm not looking for you to tell me you're going to start Olympic lifting again, or that you're going to sign up for some, Brazilian jiu-jitsu class. I don't want that. What I want to know is something that's really easy that you can win at every single day. And from there, somebody might say, I'm going to walk. Okay, great. That's your one thing. Or I'm going to go and I'm going to show up at the gym and I'm going to do a circuit, the same circuit every day, a very simple circuit. Okay, great. as long as you can commit to it every single day. Now, that's one tool in the arsenal that most people are not willing to take the time to develop, to just really lock it in, right? And so for the average athlete, for the guy who used to be this competitor, it seems like he's going backwards, but what he doesn't realize what he's doing is he's building a new foundation that doesn't exist. Because the foundation to be healthy at 35, 40, 50 years old, if you haven't been doing it for 10 years, it doesn't exist anymore, even though you think it might. Your knowledge of how to build a foundation still exists, but the foundation itself is not there. It's a dream. It's really what it is. It's a dream at this point. So what you have to do is you having to start laying foundation. Drinking water would be another one. Getting enough sleep is another one. Hanging up the work hat at 5 o'clock at night is another one. So there's all kinds of tools that you put in your arsenal, your toolbox of things that you can pull out when you need to, that need to be redeveloped over time. And we get this structure from school. We get this structure from team sports, but we never learned how to build that structure into our personal lives. And that's one of the reasons why I really like training wrestlers, athletes, people that used to be, I should say. At this time, if you are already doing really well, then I'm not your guy. But if you're the guy who used to be that way and wants to learn how to create and build that foundation now in your life, I'm the guy to talk to.
Now, when you deal with these athletes, and we talk about wrestlers being somewhat bullheaded in nature and stubborn, individual, it's a team sport in some respects, but it's still ultimately an individual sport. It's you out there on the mat. Is it difficult to try to break through that ceiling of people that believe they know how to do it already and they don't want to listen to you, or you're having a conversation with a guy on the street who's like, no, I know how to do this. I mean, how hard is it to break through that wall and say, all right, you know what? No, you don't know how to do it anymore.
Right. You can have this conversation with people all the time. Go to any holiday party, and if there's a personal trainer there or some kind of fitness person, even a guy that's just standing in the party that's in shape, somebody's going to go over to that guy at some point, and they're going to tell them the workout program that they do, and they're going to tell them what they've been eating. It happens to me all the time. I don't understand people when they come to me and they tell me, oh man, so here's my workout schedule and here's what I'm doing. And, here's what I'm eating. And what they're looking for is just approval, right? They're just looking for me to give them a thumbs up. And I can't be helpful to you if all you're looking for from me is a thumbs up to tell you that what you're doing is perfect. I can't help you. The only way that, I can help you, the only way that you can be taught is once you realize that the person that's in front of you knows more than you know, or is more experienced at that one thing than you are. It's like showing up for practice as a wrestling coach and saying, or as a somebody on the wrestling team, and you tell your coach what you need to do that day. It doesn't make sense. It's just that the tables are turned. So I can't help somebody if somebody comes to me and they tell me, I need to do it this way, or I want to start doing this, I want to start doing that. It's like, the only thing that I can do, and there is a lot of bullheadedness in people that are athletes and wrestlers specifically. The only way to really get them to come to terms with where they are is to get them when they're almost at their most vulnerable and have the conversation with them. This is why I think working online is a lot more, for me, a lot more impactful than one-on-one clients. When I work with a client one-on-one in the gym, I don't get to talk to them about their life. I don't get to talk to them about, the reasons why we're doing things, or the reasons why building these habits is so important. I don't get to have that conversation at the gym because we're just focusing on the workouts. But if I get to have a conversation with you like we're having right now, and I get to really dig down deep into what it is that you really want, and then what I believe to be the thing that's going to get you there the fastest. If you're able to hear that and accept that and take that on as something that you're willing to dedicate time to, then and only then can I have that impact on you. But if you are holding on tight to your belief system that you've created over the last 20 years that has gotten you nowhere, well, then you're going to stay exactly where you are.
This also goes, there's that bullheaded nature with the athlete that thinks they know more. And then there's, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to throw myself under the bus here. Then there's the excuse guy, because I produce 10 podcasts. I do a lot of freelance work. I got 2 kids at home. I stay at home. I take the oldest to preschool. I'm that stay at home dad, build my own business kind of thing. And I travel a lot, especially for wrestling during the end of the year, where I'm announcing events, boom, 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 boom. I think the month of March, I'll be home 5 days. So you get the excuse guy where, okay, I'm ready to work out. Like I said, I rolled my ankle, I think, at the trampoline park. So there's a couple days I'm off my feet. And then, I'm traveling, food's not always great, airplane, there's so many excuses that you can throw out. And they may be valid in terms of time management, but that's another argument entirely. How do you try to break through the ceiling of the bullheaded guy who's always got an excuse for everything? And I'm going to use myself as an example here.
Well, let's use you for an example.
And I'm not using this as free consultation by any means. I'm just using it as an example.
Jason, don't worry. I'm going to send you a bill. So you okay? Is
it going to end in a 7? Is it going to be $297? That's all I got to know.
It will. Trust me, it'll be a very marketable number. You won't feel any pain. So here's the deal. When you say that, time management is a big one for most people, actually, that is probably the number one reason why people don't achieve any kind of don't achieve the body or the health that they want to achieve. It's time management, right? And on my show, I've had David Allen, who is probably one of the most famous guys in time management in the world. I've had multiple people because it's such a big part of the conversation, right? But one of the things that most people don't do, which you're a businessman, this is also, entrepreneurs are one of my favorite people to actually work with as well, because I can make the business analogy to you and you'll understand it. So if you wanted to create this podcast, this episode right here, right? And you waited until what day that I don't know what day you're planning to host, to post this on your social media and your website and everything. But if you waited until the day before, would that be good planning on your part?
Absolutely not. I mean, matter of fact, I don't know when this is gonna go, because I've got to prepare for the month that I'm on the road. It's like, okay, we got content we got to get out. You think I'm going to do that from a hotel room in Topeka, Kansas? No. Right.
So you are doing, in a sense, you're doing preparation, right? Because you are preparing yourself so this way you are not stuck behind the 8 ball when you're on the road and when a week comes up where, oh my God, I just realized we don't have a podcast to go up. And then you're scrambling and trying to figure things out. And then you put out this show that's subpar, right? And I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but now think of that in a health sense. If you approached every single day that way, every single day where you don't know what's to come, then how are you ever going to achieve success, right? So when you show up to the wrestling mat or to practice that day and your coach says, we're going to work on takedowns today and we're going to work on, whatever it is, then that's preparation for the match, right? But if every single day you were expecting to somehow wing it and win that match, if we're using the analogy that the day is the match day, well, if you were going to win that match that day, I guarantee you're going to lose every single day because you didn't prepare. So it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily change everything in your life. It just means that slowly, just like in wrestling, just like in any sport, first you have to learn the basic techniques. First you have to learn how to stand. Right? You stand, you have to learn how to, then you have to learn how to, to put somebody in a hold. Then you have to learn how to take somebody down, single leg, double leg, it's all these little tiny things that all add up to this very, very efficient athlete, right? Same thing for business. You take all your time to create this content in advance, and then you organize it over time, you polish it up, and you put it out there on the day that it's supposed to happen, and it lands where people look at it and they go, that guy has it together, right? So, but why do we in our lives expect that we should know how to be healthy? Most of the time, none of us were taught how to eat healthy. Most of the time, nobody showed us how to be physically active. That in a way that can be that can keep us limber, right? Jumping around on a trampoline. God knows your body's not limber. So that's probably a lot of the aches and pains you were feeling. And, just in your ankles as well. So if you're not training for that, and then on the day you expect to be able to execute, why would you ever expect to succeed? Right? So the thing to do would be back up, right? Set some goals. 3 months from now, I want to have a certain amount of tools in my arsenal, tools in my toolbox that I can use that will help me achieve the body that I want, whatever it is, whatever your goal is, right? I'm being very generic there in my assessment of whatever it is that you want to do. But if you want to drop, say 20, 30, 40, you said you're hovering around 255 right now. If you want to drop 50 pounds, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen by accident. It's going to happen by, learning how to prep food, just like the way you prep out podcasts. It's going to be learning how to drink enough water every single day. Easy wins, little things like that over time build. So for somebody like you who says that you're lazy or whatever it is, however you want to define it.
Yeah, I'd say lazy. Yeah, to a point. I don't say I'm sedentary, but I could be moving a lot more than I should be. And again, it was. Let's go back to that. The marathon I tried to run 2013. I didn't just get off my couch, register. I trained for 6-7 months. And ultimately, this also will go into another question about limitations. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I'm not going to sit up right now and be like, I'm going to run a marathon tomorrow. It just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, that would be really stupid.
Well, it's even training for 7 months. It really wasn't the smartest decision.
Right. Well, who knows? I mean, who knows what your training schedule was like? And maybe you're right. Maybe in terms of expectations, you were setting an expectation to be able to run for 26.2 miles. Maybe that was your expectation, and that wasn't for somebody at your weight, for somebody who hasn't run in a really long time, so somebody who grew up hating running. I think you said you didn't like
the build too, because here's something I learned about runners. I looked around. Most of them were slender, long, they had the slender legs. I mean, I've got pretty diesel calves because, when you're an overweight kid growing up, your leg, and you start hitting the leg press when you start learning how to work out. They're still pretty pristine. I'll be honest with you there, but they're not built for running. The muscles take a lot longer. I learned this after the fact that's why guys that have got trunk legs don't run. It's because it takes a lot longer for them to recover. But anyway, back to your point. That was the limitations there. It's not smart to train like that. But continue.
That's right. But, maybe if you did want to, and this would be something that you would figure out how to do, right? If you were really putting in the time to plan this, but maybe something to do wouldn't have been a marathon. Maybe something that you could have done was a triathlon, right? Getting in the water, obviously. I mean, even if you're a heavy guy, you could swim, and especially if you're swimming salt water, it's not that much. It's a great workout for the joints. Getting on a bike, which again is not like you're not constantly pounding, and then the run is a much shorter part of that training program. So maybe that would have been, who knows? I mean, I'm brainstorming for other things that you could have considered that would have been maybe a better fit for your body type, right? And getting into, like you mentioned, limitations, understanding your limitations, that's a huge one. When somebody shows up to work out with me and they show me a picture of this model, 6-pack model that is jacked, and they're this 300-pound person, it's like, I mean, what are we talking about here? Like, you obviously don't have the connection between reality and where you're going. So it's, for some reason, some people just don't know that about themselves. Now, that's an extreme example, but it happens all the time with people who are 50 pounds overweight, who decide the way to get back into it is to create a schedule around running a marathon. Now, that could be a good thing for a lot of people. It really could. But for you, maybe it wasn't the best choice. But the thing that you did do was you took the time to execute on that. You executed. You realized not the best thing for me. So then you back up, you go back to the drawing board, and you try something else. So there was a really good learning process in there for you, but you didn't. But now it's like, well, did you take that information and apply it somewhere else, or did you take that information and go, I'm not supposed to do this, and then just stop right there?
Yeah, the frustrating part about it, I think that whole thing was realizing, and here's the thing. I'm going to, kind of open up myself here a little bit in terms of vulnerability. But during that whole process, I pulled a muscle underneath, right around where I was breathing. And I've got a young daughter at the time. And I just about to start my run. I'm warming up and I'm like, and I'm thinking I'm having a heart attack. I don't know what the heck, life is flashing before my eyes. I got a young daughter. I didn't know what to think. It was just a pulled muscle. And, I was working at USA Wrestling. Most of the listeners here know that, and highly stressful job. Olympic governing body, things of that nature. And we go through the doctor, they run all these tests to come out. Oh, it's just a pulled muscle. They go, we got good news. We can take you off your blood pressure medicines. Like, all right. Bad news. We need to work on your blood sugar here. So it took basically a pulled muscle to discover that health-wise, okay, my blood sugar's out of whack, and I think people can put two and two together and what that actually means. But it was, and the frustrating part with that, and this goes to people who lived hard in their 20s. This is kind of a lesson, I think, going off the rails a little bit. Well, living hard in your 20s does catch up with you in your 30s because college for 7 years, you can kind of put two and two together there. But when I'm at I was 230 pounds, lightest I'd been since graduating high school. Then to find out when you're eating right, you're training every day, you're running 3 and 4 miles, you've got, you're going the long runs on Saturdays. And then to find out that, hey, guess what? You're in the best shape you've been in 10 years, and now you're type 2. It's kind of demoralizing in some sense. So the lesson for you guys listening there in your 20s, take care of yourself then because it's going to catch up with you. And how much have you had to experience with that with people that, again, they used to they hit it hard and all of a sudden their body's paying for what they did in their 20s and it's kind of hard to repair.
Oh, I mean, you're not talking about like one or two. You're talking about every single person. Even myself included, there is no escaping what you've done to your body. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't get to trade out. It's all there still. Now the body is an amazing thing. It does rebuild and replenish and heal. Now that's we know that to be true. But the thing is that if you really abuse it, now any competitive sport creates abuse. I had a terrible sprained ankle when I was in high school, and that carried on for years and years and years. And to this day now, I don't play. If one of my buddies is like, hey, you want to go play basketball with? I have like a 5 o'clock group of guys that plays every Thursday. I'm like, I'm not going. I'm just not going because I know that ankle is weak, and I know that there's at least 4 guys on that team that's gonna like step underneath me when I go up for a rebound. So I pass on a lot of that stuff because I need to take care of my body from something that I did years and years ago. And we all have that, whether it's our blood sugar, I have a buddy who in college ate Papa John's every single day and eventually developed Crohn's disease. And he thought he was invincible. He thought he was this kid. Now he can't put on weight for his life. He's like a stick because most of the time he's just suffering in pain. And it's just this, now maybe the Crohn's disease would have come along, but he didn't teach himself. Now at this point, he's still trying to fix it with medication instead of trying to fix it with nutrition. And it's just the same conversation. Now for you, the conversation around your blood, your sugar levels, that's straight up not a fitness thing. There's no reason why you should expect that you're in the fittest place that you've ever been, but unless you've revamped your diet specifically with the goal of driving down your blood sugar levels, then there's no reason why it would have changed. Now does the physical activity have an impact on it? Sure it does, but not to the point that it's going to fix anything if you're already heading down that path. Does that make sense?
Absolutely does. And Rob, there's so many different topics we can broach with this. And as we're rolling around, and I don't want to keep making this thing about me because this is about you and what you do for people. And obviously your foray into podcasting is really what piqued the interest here. And it was just mentioning wrestling on Podcast Junkies. I want to circle back to your show, what people can get out of it, how they find it. Of course, it's on iTunes. You can go to OpenSkyFitness.com, hit the podcast link. But when it comes to helping people, using the medium that we're using right now, podcasting, it's mobile, it's go anywhere. People are having, CarPlay in the cars now. Most people will even put an earbud in. I fall asleep with an earbud, much to the behest of my wife. And it's a medium that has enabled a lot of people to help people. How has this medium enabled you to really help people get in touch with their fitness and be able to use your expertise and your own personal experiences to guide them to making the right choices?
Well, there's 2 things in here that I think are really good. And it's a really good question because as a podcaster, and if anybody's out there thinking about starting a podcast, you get to find your voice, right? If you and I were having this conversation 3 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to articulate the things the way that I'm articulating them to you now. Because and you, I don't know I can't remember when you started podcasting, but I know you have a lot under your belt. do you feel like now that you have these podcasts, the conversations that you have with people, not just on the show, but in your life, how much deeper they are, how more inquisitive you are about what other people are going through and kind of what makes them tick? That's one of the things in podcasting that I think that most people miss in like on the radio or even XM, whatever it is, the long form conversations that happen in podcasting. It's like being a fly on the wall for a conversation you would never have the opportunity to hear. And that is, and not only that, it's like it is, I should say, not like, but it is the Wild West of information. 10 years ago, I mean, let's even make it less than that, like 3 years ago, because podcasting has grown significantly more in the last 3 years. But anytime before that, the only way we got our information about health, about sports, about what's happening in the world is by media, right? And that's filtered. We all know that. That is very filtered by people who want to make a certain amount of money because they want to make sure that their ratings are a certain place, right? But when it comes to podcasting, yeah, we want the numbers, but we also want to deliver raw, unfiltered information that people can take with them and apply in their lives. And they get to do it at their own pace. And that's one of the coolest things about podcasts. Now, in my podcast, one of the things that I didn't do early on that I started to do recently that has had a major effect on the internal conversation amongst the people that are actually a part of the group is I started a Facebook group. I started a Facebook group because I wasn't continuing the dialogue after a show aired. And so what I did was I started a Facebook group called the OpenSkyFitness Facebook group. It's open to anybody. It's a closed group, but you have to ask to join. But the group that's in there, every time I post an episode, immediately after the group goes in, everybody's 200 and plus people in there. Everybody's in there having conversations about it, talking about how that applies to their life, helping other people out with their nutrition, with their recipes, with their workout program, and with all this stuff. And what it does is it provides this community that most people struggle with, that most people can't even find the first step into being able to have the accountability that this kind of group provides. So that's one of the things that I think has really, really helped our podcast community is the Open Sky Fitness podcast group on Facebook.
Yeah, and Harry Duran, who, again, how I discovered your show, also has a Podcast Junkies group for those. And you know, if you become a patron of this show, you actually get into the Matt Talk Online closed Facebook group, too. So hang on for the post show on that, and we'll talk about that after we say goodbye to Rob. But, Rob, there's this, so many podcasts have the rapid fire segment, and I'm no different, although I haven't come up with a name of mine yet, because the name of this show is Short Time, which is the wrestling terminology, even though this is a long form interview. In this segment I've got coming up should be short time, but it's not. But anyway, it's 10 questions, somewhat wrestling related, 90 seconds. I don't need long drawn out responses. I want the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready for it?
Sure.
3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, question 1. Who's your favorite person to follow on Twitter?
Oh, that's a good one. Jesus. That's tough.
I don't know if Jesus has a Twitter account, but I'll take it. Question 2.
Right.
You win the Olympic gold medal. What are you having for dinner?
Always going to be steak, no matter what. That's my celebratory meal.
Who was your favorite all-time wrestler growing up?
This is going to come off like a joke, but probably Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, you know what? That's a fair answer. Question 4. Your all-time favorite flavor of Gatorade?
Oh, lemon lime.
Yeah, that's a classic. Number 5, favorite video game of all time?
Contra.
Up, up, down, down, left, right, BA start. Question 6, your favorite post-match meal? I guess we might have already repeated this.
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely a steak.
All right, number 7, your favorite wrestling movie?
Obviously, I think it's most people. We've had a discussion around this, but Vision Quest.
Who's one guy from history you'd like to wrestle regardless of weight class?
From history?
Yeah, it's like that Fight Club question. Most people say Abraham Lincoln. Like, you're not going to be able to pick Lincoln here. So
I think it would be fun to have a battle with like Stallone or some like 80s action movie guy. Those are some of my favorites. I'd love to like grapple with one of those guys, but only in their prime, not now. They're old. Those guys are old now.
Number 9, your funniest teammate of all time, regardless of sport.
I knew a guy who he was doing bicep curls in the gym, and he was one of the teammates. But anyway, we had to work out right between, and he was doing bicep curls with an easy bar and knocked out his 2 front teeth, and he had to go around and tell everybody how he did it.
All right, question 10, Rob Dionne, what is your spirit animal?
Polar bear, for sure.
Good one. Good choices. I didn't even start the timer, so who even cares? It's like, whose line is it anyway, where the points don't matter and the scores are made up.
Exactly.
But Rob, final thoughts here as we close down this episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Just to pitch anything we didn't talk about, something you want to inform the public about, and tell them about OpenSkyFitness.com and where to find you on the web.
The best way to find me is OpenSkyFitness.com. But if you really want to have a direct conversation with me, I would say the fastest way to do it is by going to the Open Sky Fitness podcast group on Facebook and join that community. And from there, obviously, if you're interested in this kind of conversation and continuing it on for yourself, is checking out Open Sky Fitness podcast on iTunes.
You are listening to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast with my daddy, Jason Bryant.
Great conversation there with Rob Dionne. Had that one in the can for a while. We've been waiting for the close of the college wrestling season to drop this one out. And Rob, with some great insight on fitness. I know some of us are sitting around going, what do I know? What do I need to know about fitness? You're not going to listen to me about fitness, that's for sure. You're going to listen to Rob about it because he actually knows what he's talking about. So those of you coming over to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast for the first time to listen to what Rob had to say, or you're a friend of Rob's, or you're interested in this type of thing, welcome. The show is the flagship show of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. You can find all the shows at matttalkonline.com if you're privy to using iTunes as your podcatcher of choice. Quick link, go to itunes.com/MattTalk. That'll give you a link to all 19 shows here on the network when it comes to talking college, Olympic, and high school level wrestling. It's really all I've got today for housekeeping, with the exception, we're still looking for Jim Cook stories, the recently retired coach at Wisconsin Parkside who passed away during as injury sustained while he was jogging during the NCAA Division I championships. He has a memorial service set for March 28th in Kenosha, which is where the University of Wisconsin Parkside is located. Check out parksiderangers.com for more information there. But I'm still looking for stories about what this man meant to you. So there's a lot of Parkside alum out there that are coaching, and they're realizing that this guy had a big impact on their life. So if you're a coach, if you're a former athlete, or if you're a coach against him, if you had any reaction or any interaction rather with Coach Cook and he had an impact, a positive impact on your life, I'm looking to tell that story on a future episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. We've got a couple in so far. You can do that by leaving a voicemail at my Skype line at 651-315-8171, or go to matttalkonline.com/contact. There is a voice app there. You can leave a voicemail there up to 5 minutes, or you can type in your comment and send it in through the contact form. Again, if you want to leave a voicemail, that's probably the easiest way, and I can record that and play it back on the show. Do so by leaving a message. It's just going to go straight to voicemail. It's going to be like, the message you are calling is not available. Yeah, one of those type of things from Skype. 651-315-8171. I want to hear your stories about Jim Cook, and tell the world what type of man this was. That's all I got for this episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Rate, review, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Getting back on the podcast train, Jake Residori of SIU Edwardsville, Nathan Kreiser of Campbell are coming up on upcoming episodes, as well as we're going to start digging into the world outside of amateur wrestling. We're going to dig into the world of people that are related to it. I actually had a chance to see Clayton Jack, who is in the world of professional wrestling right now. We're going to be doing a professional wrestling arc in terms of wrestlers from our world that are in the sports entertainment world right now. So we're going to have a series on them coming up soon. We'll probably get Chaz Betts back on the show, but Chad Gable, part of American Alpha, working on that. But that's all I got for now. I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me, because you've always got time. Say it with me now. For Short Time.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.